Good to go?
Good to go.
I want to thank Jeff so much for inviting me to read this afternoon. I love the bookstore. I love Provincetown. It's wonderful to see so many friends here. I was going to say so many old friends, but we don't use that word anymore. So many great friends here. Thank you all for coming. And I am thrilled that I'm sitting next to my dear friend, 45 years? Yeah. Yep. Tim McFeeley. Tim and I met when we both were singing in the Harvard Glee Club. 47 years. Oh, we're going to celebrate our 50th anniversary. Tim and I sang together in the Harvard Glee Club, and that's how we first met. Tim has had a spectacular career. Executive director of the Human Rights Campaign Fund during a time when they did some monumental and very important work. He doesn't want me to lionize him anymore, so we'll leave it at that. But what's going to happen is I'm going to read for about 17 minutes from one story in the collection, and then Tim and I will have a bit of a conversation, which I hope will then inspire a lot of you to ask questions as well. I love Q&A, so don't feel shy. Please go right at it. So Zigzag is a collection of 16 stories about the lives of older gay men in Boston. I started writing the stories about 5 or 6 years ago. I had gotten away from short stories after my first book, written a novel and then a bunch of nonfiction, and I was really eager to explore the genre of short stories again, and especially eager now to write about older gay men. The first collection, The Language We Use Up Here, is really about younger gay men, and 35 years had passed, and I thought, well, I'm older, and people I know are older, and our stories are different from the stories I was first writing. So that's how this collection was born. I'm going to read, with Tim's encouragement, a story called The Walker. I'm not going to read the whole story. One thing that I often say when I'm doing these readings is that these stories are about twice as long as the ones in The Language We Use Up Here, and the reason for that is that older gay men have long backstories, and when you start telling their stories, you have to kind of take into consideration what the backstory is all about. So many of these stories include some flashbacks to earlier times. So they're long stories. I'm going to read just, I hope, a tantalizing excerpt from this story. It's called The Walker. When Tavish's balance got a little too iffy, in the last couple of months he'd fallen twice on the way to the bathroom, his doctor suggested a walker. Sure, Tavish said, feigning delight. I'll take one who's 25 and built like a football player. He paused, giving Dr. Marshall a tongue-in-cheek grin. Oh, you mean one of those metal contraptions? Dr. Marshall shook his head in tongue-in-cheek disbelief. He had been Tavish's primary care physician at the Gay Health Clinic for 15 years. Yes, Tavish, one of those metal contraptions, at least for the middle of the night when you get up to pee. The MS is progressing faster than I or your neurologist expected. Dr. Marshall was in his mid-40s and good-looking in the way that gay men in their 40s who ate right, exercised regularly, and had inherited a lucky set of genes were good-looking. Christ, Tavish thought, these days every man in his 40s, gay or straight, looks good to me. He tried to picture himself using a walker. He knew this had been coming. The cane, prescribed a year ago, had only been a stopgap. You know I can't stand that neurologist, he said. Dr. Marshall gave Tavish a no sign of empathy. We can find you another neurologist if you'd like. But that won't change the prognosis, will it? Tavish asked, a bit too hostilely. No, it won't. Well then, how long before I'm in a wheelchair? He studied Dr. Marshall's face again, hoping his physician would reassure him that a wheelchair was not yet in the offing. But Dr. Marshall gave him no sign of encouragement. To be honest, Tavish, I think you'd have more options in a wheelchair. The walker will help you get around your apartment, get you to the bathroom, that sort of thing. But with a wheelchair, and the neurologist agrees, you'll have more mobility, especially outside. Look, if you'd be more comfortable getting another opinion. Tavish managed a snicker. I want another life, Doc. At this point, it's still your call, Marshall said. There's no immediate need for a wheelchair. But sooner rather than later, right? Yes, I think so. Dr. Marshall paused before delivering what Tavish knew was supposed to be brighter news. There are some terrific new models out there these days, very comfortable, safe, equipped with all sorts of nifty features. Ha! Nifty features. Like a pocket for my condoms, lube, and Viagra. Dr. Marshall indulged him with a faint smile. Tavish, this does not have to curtail your sex life, if that's what you're worried about. His reassurance sounded both professional and perfunctory. My sex life. Ah, yes, my fabulous sex life. A year ago, he was still hooking up. A few regulars, nothing serious, but guys who loved older men and would text Tavish whenever they needed a daddy. But then he started using a cane, and pretty soon his libido had fizzled. Dr. Marshall had told him that there was no correlation between the two events. Tavish wasn't convinced. So what do you think, he asked. Is there a cohort of guys out there who get into sex with men in wheelchairs? You aren't going to be in the wheelchair all the time, Dr. Marshall made direct eye contact with him. We can get you some counseling, too. I mean, if you need to. Tavish cut him short. If I need to what? The anger was back in his voice. Vent my outrage? Well, yes, but I'd like to think that counseling might help you find something more than outrage to express. Tavish stared at Dr. Marshall, trying to decide what face to show his physician. Scorn, indifference, pleading. I'll pass on the counseling, Doc. Just the main course. One wheelchair. Marshall nodded. So we're doing this, he asked. I love the way you say we, Tavish said, smirking at Dr. Marshall's baby blues. Yes, we are doing this. 3 weeks later, the wheelchair arrived, delivered by the medical equipment people to Tavish's 10th floor condo downtown. Just in the nick of time, he quipped as the delivery men began assembling it in his living room. I'm supposed to go for a walk today. He looked out the windows, which faced the Boston Common. It was a bright March day, temperatures in the low 50s, and the radio had said. He had not been out of his apartment since his last visit to the doctor. The men explained how to use the wheelchair, its special features, its braking mechanism. Tavish listened without enthusiasm. He had no intention of driving the thing himself. An agency he'd contracted with was sending a companion who would take him on his outings. When the men left, Tavish sat on the sofa, staring at the wheelchair. Amid the Heppel-white furniture, the oriental carpets, the yew-wood display cabinet with its collection of Chinese blue and white porcelain, the thing was an eyesore. He'd never been so grateful for the second unused bedroom, his junk room. That's where he'd store it. 2 hours later, John, the concierge, rang to announce the arrival of your assistant from the agency. There was a whisper of skepticism in John's voice. Send him up, Tavish instructed, and hobbled over to the door with his cane. Or was it her, he wondered. In his world of diminishing expectations, he hoped that wishing for a male attendant was not too much to ask. He opened the door which faced the elevator and waited to see who would appear. When the assistant got off the elevator, Tavish was taken aback. He, praise Jesus, was practically a kid, somewhere in his early 20s, and heavenly. Olive skin, dark curly hair, luscious pouty lips. Tavish resisted beaming at the lad. Instead, he held out his hand in a gesture of formal courtesy. Hello, sir, the man said, shaking hands. I'm Danny Maliano, but you can call me Mags. Mags? Tavish asked, studying the kid's olive black eyes in 5 o'clock shadow. He was wearing a trim Celtics jacket, which emphasized his magnificent torso. Still, as delectable as he was, the kid looked like the kind of straight townie who almost 40 years ago had sent Tavish to the emergency room when he was attacked, walking home from Buddy's. Yes, sir, Mags. When my family moved to Charlestown, and that's where I'm from, no one knew how to pronounce Maliano. They said Magliano. The mag part stuck. Mags. He shrugged his glorious shoulders. Come in, Tavish invited. He was feeling wobbly on his feet and wanted to sit down. Charlestown, huh? I grew up right next door in Everett. He listened to how ingratiating he was trying to sound. They sure would have known how to pronounce your name there. The place was full of Italians back then. He motioned to the sofa. Please, have a seat, before easing himself down into his wingback chair. The kid sat down. He seemed oblivious to Tavish's handsome decor. Man, when I was growing up, Charlestown kids and Everett kids did not get along, the boy reported. They didn't in my day either, Tavish said, holding his cane in front of himself for extra support. He gave the lad a quick, appreciative examination. So, is that what I should call you? Mags? If you don't mind, I'd prefer calling you Danny. Okay, Danny's cool. Nestling further into the sofa, Danny splayed out his legs. To Tavish's disappointment, the kid's jeans were loose, so whatever his goodie basket contained remained a mystery. One of the guys in Tavish's bridge group had once called him a randy old queen. Randy, yes, Tavish retorted. Queen on special occasions, but old, never. Everyone had laughed. They were all well past 60. Well, there's the contraption, Tavish said, nodding over to the wheelchair. Fresh off the assembly line. I'm christening her Nellie Bell. Nellie Bell? Roy Rogers' Jeep. Danny sat there, not reacting. You do know who Roy Rogers was, no? That guy on TV with the kids show? The one with the sweater and the puppets? No, Roy Rogers was the Rogers before Mr. Rogers. Oh, okay, Danny said obligingly. Tavish was annoyed by the boy's deference. He reminded himself not to check out the kid's crotch again. Well then, Mr. Danny Maliano, shall we be off? Danny gave him a thumbs up. Perfect pronunciation. I've studied Italian, Tavish told him. I once had a hopeless crush on an Italian. Can't beat the Italian ladies, Danny said. Yes, so I'm told. Danny offered to get him into the wheelchair, but Tavish shooed him away. I'm not that handicapped, he barked. With his cane, he pushed himself out of the wingback and shuffled over to Nellie Bell. Voila, a new Olympic track record. Danny laughed. So let's give this a whirl. As he tried to sit down in the wheelchair, his legs began to wobble. Danny immediately came to his aid, supporting him under the arms as Tavish lowered himself in. First time, Tavish explained. I'll get the hang of it. He let out a deep sigh. It was a relief to have made it into the chair, and an exasperation to have needed help for such a simple operation. A frustration, too, that the only touches he would receive from this lovely young man would be the ones that came from professional assistants. Mind getting my beret? Tavish asked. It's over there, on the desk in the hall. He watched as Danny went to fetch his cap, checking out the kid's tight ass, which was as mouth-watering as the rest of him. Danny returned and handed him the beret, a dark olive one that Tavish had picked up one summer in France. Were you a Green Beret, sir? Tavish let out a loud guffaw. When you get to know me better, you'll understand just how absurd that question is. Okay, Danny said. It seemed to be his word of choice whenever he wanted to express compliance. There was another awkward moment of silence. Would you like a blanket over your legs, sir? It's a little chilly out there. The image of a blanket swaddled invalid popped into Tavish's mind. Oh, I suppose. There's a lap rug on the sofa over there. Danny went over to the sofa and picked up the soft woolen throw, another overseas purchase, this one bought in Scotland many years ago. I didn't know these were called lap rugs, he said. Stick with me, kid. I'll teach you plenty. I'm going to stop there.
Let's see. How do you come up with a name like Tavish?
Oh boy, okay. I've never revealed this before.
Oh.
So, this story is very, very, very loosely based on one of my favorite novels, Great Expectations. And so, Tavish is Miss Havisham, and Danny Magliano is Magwitch. I've never revealed that, so thank you for asking. It was not a setup.
When you start writing a story, some of the stories are told in the first-person narrative, and this one obviously is a third-person account. How do you decide, or do you give it a whirl both ways?
I do, in the very early drafts, I give it a whirl both ways, Tim. There are 16 stories in the collection. 8 are written in first person and 8 are written in third person, and I alternate back and forth. I do it just by, I guess, by the sound and the voice. how is this story, who's telling this story, how will it be most accessible? So this story felt as if it should be told at some distance in third person. Other stories felt as if they should be told with that very intimate first person voice.
Yeah, great. So let's go back to Phil, age 30. Did you know anybody? Were you close with any OGMs, old gay men?
Yes, and I was terrified of them.
Why?
For all the stereotyped reasons. I suppose they were going to hit on me. You and I know one of those older gay men that when we were in our teens and 20s, we knew somebody who took us under his wing and very, I think, very lovingly took us under his wing, but I think also would have been happy to bed either of us if that had been the case. So to answer your question, yes, I knew older gay men.
This would be a follow-up
and
question.
I was I think I was pretty terrified of them, yeah.
Anyone, like in your family? Anyone close that you knew?
I had a cousin who was 10 years older than me that really became my gay uncle. He passed away a few years ago, and I absolutely adored him, and he really supported me through a lot of ups and downs. And then our mutual friend, who, when I broke up with my first lover, again, was very supportive of me as well. Now I have lots of older gay friends.
Right, we all do. Right, welcome. I'm wondering, people will see this when you read the stories, that you put a lot of research into things. I noticed the descriptions of the cuisine and different kinds of cuisine, the place, Boston itself, language. There's a whole story with lots of Polish in it. Where did that come from?
So I'll start with the Polish thing. I really feel as if I want to make sure that my characters are not just names, but have a background. And part of the background, for me, being Italian American, an important part of anybody's background is their ethnic heritage. So I think in almost every story I account for the ethnic heritage of my characters. As far as the details about Boston and cuisine and furniture, again, I want readers to see these stories, to inhabit the place where my characters inhabit the stories. You know, something that every writing teacher will tell you is show, don't tell. So rather than just tell you, I want to show you the milieu that these characters live in. The furniture, the food, the occupations were very important to me as well. And I try to turn those details into metaphors as well.
Yeah. Lawyers, law students learn the same thing, to don't lead the witness, let the witness talk, right? Okay, good. Ethnic stereotypes, though. In Boston, there's lots of ethnicity, the Italians and Irish and blacks, African Americans, so forth. It's a tricky thing for a writer if you're not of that ethnicity. How do you approach that? You're Italian, because you obviously got to be very careful not to fall into stereotypical stuff, especially in dialogue.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I am obviously very mindful of that. I think it helps to have grown up in as an Italian American and become very aware of all the stereotypes. So I'm hoping that in every case, Polish characters, black character, Mexican American character, I'm hoping that in every case I do justice to who these people are. At the same time, I don't want them to be cookie cutter Mexicans, cookie cutter blacks, cookie cutter Irish. I'm hoping that each of them has an individuality as well as an overall ethnicity.
Do you test it with any of your friends of those ethnicities, or tried out?
Well, certainly with the Polish, I certainly passed the dialogue by a Polish friend of mine. No, I didn't really. I mean, I have a bunch of friends and people in writing groups who read the stories and commented on them, and none of them accused me of indulging in stereotypes. So I figure I succeeded.
The stories are filled with characters who have lots of friends. Friends are an important part of that. You want to elaborate on that? Is that I mean, the obvious point is, people, gay men, gay women, lesbians, they create their own families because they're shunned by their families. But talk a little bit about these groupings and how they play off each other.
You're asking great questions. So yeah, I mean, I was very aware of how these men have formed families based on the friends they choose. And I should quickly add that in some cases, those friend groups are not always necessarily supportive. I'm thinking about one story where the character belongs to a bridge group, and they really give him a hard time about that, about certain choices that he's making. So the friends act as foils, they act as supporters, they act as people who challenge what the main character is doing or saying. But I hope at the same time most of them also come across as people who care about these characters, care about their well-being, care about them coming out of whatever difficulties they have.
I have one more question, and then we want other people to ask questions. But these characters are largely, came of age 30, 32, 35 years old in the 80s during AIDS. So I didn't detect a heavy hand in terms of thematics here, but there is a survival and resilience theme here, isn't there?
Absolutely. So there are characters who are alluded to who have succumbed to AIDS. There are other characters who are very sick. There's a character who's completely freaked out because he's fainted a couple times and he doesn't know what's going on. Another character whose partner died but not of AIDS. And another character who in his 60s contracts HIV. At the same time, absolutely, I think all 16 of the main characters in these stories, I would say, are survivors. Survivors of trauma, survivors of depression, survivors of never having had a supportive relationship. So yeah, I think I was exploring how older gay men get through the next phase of their lives and transcend whatever hardships, difficulties come their way.
And very well done. Let's see what other people want to ask.
Janet.
Could you explain the title Zigzag?
Sure.
The source of it?
Yeah, so in the final story is called Zigzag, and in the final story, which I'm actually very fond of, I bring a lot of characters from other stories back, and they all show up at an art opening that one character is an artist, and he finally has a chance to have a big art opening at a gallery in Boston. And his friend, who has been his friend since high school, is the kind of the MC of the opening, and he arranges for the caterer, he arranges for the name tags and all of that sort of thing. And toward the end of the story, he's reflecting on his life and the life of his friend Raul, the Mexican-American painter. And let's see, yeah, I'm going to read this because it's better than my trying to paraphrase it. So he's reflecting on all of this, and he says, the great Catalan artist, Joan Miró, was once asked what accounted for the changes in his style over the decades, for the apparent sudden rejection of one style for another. Not a rejection, Miró insisted. It's a continuation, but it happens in another way. His artistic path, he explained, had always been a straight line, but one nourished by all the things that came before. And then he clarified, what looks like a zigzag is really a straight line. And then the narrator says, I've never forgotten those words. When I think about it, all the zigzags of my own life, my closeted high school years, the late coming out, the drama with various boyfriends, the falling in and out of love with Raul, dropping my art major, the twists and turns of my professional career, the years when Tripp was drinking excessively. Somehow, all those zigzags have turned out to be the straight line of my life, a life I am very grateful for. So yeah, I was trying to get at that sense that all of these men in all of these stories have had very checkered, sometimes painful, sometimes confusing, sometimes lost paths. But when you get to your 60s and 70s and 80s, you see it as part of a whole. Doug.
I was wondering how you settled on the stories that you put in the book. And did one lead to another, or was it more organic and just an idea popped in your head to do a different story each time?
Yeah, so I was saying that the book took about 5 or 6 years. I kept a notebook of just story ideas, and I had hundreds of them. How I settled on these 16, I think I just, one day I'd wake up and I'd sit down at the computer and choose one that seemed like it was tugging at me and start writing that one. And when that one was done, I'd go back to the notebook and find another one that was tugging at me. I wish I had written even more, but I thought this is a long enough book. One thing that I don't do, I never start a story knowing the plot, ever. For me, it's much more important to get to know my character, wind him up, put him on stage, and watch what he's going to do. So my characters actually told me what the stories were going to be. I know that sounds sort of spooky and mystical, but that's the way it is. The more you create a character in 3 dimensions, the more that character will tell you what their story is. So I never knew the ending of a story until they told me.
Oh,
Bill.
What's the relationship of the
you
stories
repeat?
to each other in time? Are they independent? Are they sequential? You said you took 5 to 6 years. What time period does it cover, or are they all sequential?
Great question. So when I first started the collection, there were going to be standalone stories. and they were all going to take place in the last 5 years. A part I didn't read because we ran out of time. Danny takes Tavish in his wheelchair on a stroll through Boston, and Tavish is looking up at all of the new skyscrapers that have replaced the combat zone, and he says, Boston is now full of towers. Only assholes like Trump put up towers anymore. So I was thinking about that period. As the collection developed, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to bring characters from one story into the next? So I think in the long run, all 16 stories are supposed to take place within 1 year. Not necessarily chronologically, no. I mean, all we know is that by the last story, all the other stories have already taken place, and these characters all end up, or some of them, not all of them. I thought that would be a little too hokey to have every character show up. Many of them show up at this art opening. So I would say, ultimately, all of the stories take place within a year or two.
You use go ahead.
Yeah, so do I want to give this away? Yeah, so one character that we meet in one story, we find out in another story has died of COVID. Yeah, yeah.
In your oh, I'm sorry, you go ahead. Just a quick one. You use a quote from Philip Roth.
Yes.
Nothing is ever put to rest.
Yeah. I love that quote. I was actually thinking about that quote today, because as much as I want to tie up each story, I also feel like a really good story suggests that the life goes on, that nothing is totally neatly sewn up, tied up. So yeah, the quote from Philip Roth, who's a writer I adore, is, if I can find it quickly. But what can I do about the fact that, as far as I can tell, nothing is put to rest, however old a man might be? I think the hopeful way of interpreting that is to say it's never over until it really is over.
That lady sings.
Until the fat lady sings. I also like this quote because within it, and I didn't know this quote at the time, is the title of another one of my books, as far as I can tell. Yeah, so it's sort of a homage to that.
So my question was going to be, who are your favorite authors? Philip Roth, and who else?
So certainly Philip Roth. When I was first cutting my teeth as a short story writer, John Updike, certainly. Philip Roth are two that come to mind immediately. Frank, I hate this question because I always draw a blank. I mean, I'm reading all the time.
In the one review I read, you're likened to Christopher Isherwood, or your stories to a single man.
Yeah, I mean that was a wonderful review blurb that I was given. I mean, I've been compared to Chekhov, to Maupassant, to John Cheever. When the first book came out, one reviewer called me the gay John Updike, which was, an enormous compliment.
To Updike.
To Updike. No. Oh, well, thank you. Frank, I admire stylists. So, to me, a novel, a collection of short stories, ultimately succeeds if there's something really rich about the prose style. So that's why Roth and Updike come to mind. When I was really just cutting my teeth writing stories, believe it or not, my heroine was Jane Austen, and the reason is that she wrote 5-6 incredible novels, all set within a very small milieu. And I thought to myself, why buy into the notion that the world of gay men is too small to create books out of? And when I was writing this book, I thought about Jane Austen. There's nothing wrong with setting all of these stories in Boston and all of these stories being about older gay men. For me, there's plenty of diversity, even in that small, circumscribed world.
I agree. Well, I wanted to say that, again, that it's really amazing to have two literary and legal giants here, two people in the queer movement that have been so instrumental in different ways to so many of us. And, you know, Phil's writing, again, you must encounter this when you see people of a certain age, and even now, who your reviews, your books, your stories have meant so much. And then Tim, of course, with your lengthy career fighting the good fight, it's just incredible. And the fact that we get two people like this together is amazing to me. Because again, like I said, when I was back a fledgling queer writer with queer newspapers in Florida, and reading your stuff, and then as a fledgling lawyer and early co-chair of the National Lesbian Gay Law Association, I remember that Abby Rubenfeld and I were co-chairs, and when she was at Lambda, we were talking about you. So it's just surreal. It's so exciting, such an honor to have you both here. And we will have the books for sale, signed copies of the books. And, you know, if you're around town and Phil's here for another few days, and of course you can see him in Boston. I hope to get him at our store in Boston for an event. But if you see Tim around, you should stop and talk to this amazing individual. Again, we said very little about him, but the impact that he's had on not just queer people, but on people in general in this country is enormous and huge. And so I just want to recognize that, and thank you, Tim, and thank you, Phil, and thank you everybody else for coming out here tonight. Thank you.